me. Okay, should have audio now. Checking the connection. Okay, cool. All right. Oh, it is very hot here. Like I said last week, it's like scorching. It actually got better for about a day or two, but then it got hot again. So it's been hot all day. Um, we are going to talk about the OG today, Ray Kurzweil, and he recently went on Lex Fridman's podcast, and he is famous for uh, just being a general uh, proponent of the singularity, the idea of the singularity, and he's an American futurist slash inventor. We're going to get into his background in more detail, but he's very famous for his he's an evangelist of the singularity, you could say. So we're going to get into it. He had a great stream with Lex Fridman. They talked about immortality. They talked about superintelligence. They talked about AI. Talked about the singularity, which are all basically similar things. Talked about nanotechnology, and talked about God a bit. It is fascinating that God comes up in every single one of these discussions, and you would think that if we had really like evolved past God or something, whatever is the goal of many who are some of the leading voices in the scientific, I guess, mainstream over the last like 10 to 20 years, you would think that this wouldn't be coming up, but it is coming up because it leaves a lack of God leaves a lot to be desired. Sorry, my dogs are barking, but they should stop soon, I would imagine. But maybe not. But I don't know what their problem is, but whatever. We're gonna press on. So this was the stream right here. This was the stream with Ray Kurzweil, and it is on Lex's channel. It was aired on the 17th, and it's titled Singularity, Superintelligence, and Immortality. It is Lex's 321st podcast. 321, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool person to have on your 321 podcast. If you're Lex Fridman and your channel started as the AI podcast, then especially that is true. But I remember Ray Kurzweil. I think he was also very big proponent when I was growing up, and I was really into like aerospace tech, and I still am into aerospace tech, but especially like more aero part of that than space. I'm very into like planes, and but I remember that they assumed in the 70s that in the 60s that by the 70s or 80s we would be on Mars, and that has not happened. We haven't even been back to the moon, if you believe that we went. I do, but I know plenty of people that don't, and they are very smart people. But it's just fascinating. We have not advanced at all, but Ray Kurzweil was someone who I think he created like Mars Direct. If that's not true, then I will take it back. We're going to see. Mars. I think he did do something here, it says. But it doesn't, if you go on kurzweilai.net. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's probably just kurzweilai.net. And it has a whole article here about him talking about us going to Mars. But I remember he had come up with some plan for us to go to Mars, and we've yet to see that happen. I just remember, even as a kid, thinking like that plan seems not sustainable. It was like a one-off where everything has to go so perfectly, which is true of, I mean, so many things, but this one is different because you're so far away that, you know, you're not even days away. You're like months away. It just didn't seem very feasible. I mean, it seemed like it theoretically could happen, but it did not seem like a good idea. I wouldn't want to be going on that mission. So let's get into Ray Kurzweil's background. Here's his Wikipedia page. And it says, he's an American inventor and futurist. He is involved in fields such as optical character recognition, text-to-speech synthesis, speech recognition technology. He's written books on health, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, technological singularity, and futurism. He's a public advocate for the futurist and transhumanist movements and gives public talks to share his optimistic look on life extension technologies and the future of nanotechnology. We're going to talk about this because we don't agree. He received a National Medal of Technology and Innovation. He was a recipient of the $500,000 MIT prize. Okay. Early life. New York. Jewish person, like my family. And later in life. Okay. He created the Kurzweil Applied Intelligence, the company, and to develop computer speech recognition systems for commercial use. Creative approach. It says, I realize that most inventions fail because the R&D department can't get them to work, but because the timing is wrong. Not all the enabling factors are at play where they are needed. Inventing is a lot like surfing. You need to anticipate and catch the wave just at the right moment. That's so true. For the past decades, Kurzweil's most effective and common approach to doing creative work has been conducted during his lucid dreamlike state, which immediately precedes his awakening state. He claims to have constructed inventions, solved difficult problems such as algorithmic business strategy and organizational and interpersonal problems. That's fascinating because I believe that there's definitely something about that weird half-asleep state. It's like you're connected to God or the all, but you're not, filtering it through you as much. Stance on future of genetics and nanotechnology and robotics. It's basically saying we could have good things and bad things happen. And Kurzweil has stressed an extreme potential dangers of nanotechnology, but argues that in practice, progress cannot be stopped because that would require a totalitarian system, and any attempt to do so would drive dangerous technologies underground and deprive responsible scientists of the tools needed for defense. That's a decent enough idea, but there is no, I mean, the whole thing is just like you cannot stop it. That's the thing about innovation. I don't think that you can. he suggests that the proper place for regulation is to ensure that technological progress proceeds safely and quickly, but does not deprive the world of profound benefits. Okay. I mean, this is. We're going to talk about that because, yeah, I was listening to another stream that I'm going to talk about with Elon Musk, and he was talking about how we can't control AI, and I was just thinking about, like, what's the only way that you could regulate it, even though I don't think that it's a good idea or that it will work. Okay. Kurzweil views the human body as a system of thousands of programs that understanding all of their functions could hold the key towards building a truly sentient AI. That's not a bad idea, but you can't build it. But we'll talk about that later. Future predictions. In 1999, Kurzweil published a book called The Age of Spiritual Machines, which goes into depth explaining his futurist ideas. He expounded on his predictions regarding nanorobotics, making the claim that within 20 years, having millions of blood cell-sized devices such as nanobots inside our bodies fighting diseases and improving our memory and cognitive capabilities. He also claims that the machine will pass the Turing test by 2029. I believe he also stated that by 2045 or 49, we would have the singularity. They talk about it in the stream. Lots of criticisms here. But we don't care. We care about this stream. He's a transhumanist. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's get into it. Okay, so Ray Kurzweil, first clip of this podcast. Lex Fridman needs no introduction on this channel, but he is a professor at MIT and he works on AI. And he is the host of the Lex Fridman podcast, and it's great. Okay, here's the first clip. It is on his predictions on the singularity. By the way, hit the like button if you haven't already, and really helps fuel the algorithm. Okay, here.
Book titled The Singularity is Near. You predicted that the singularity will happen in 2045. So now, 18 years later, do you still estimate that the singularity will happen on 2045? And maybe first, what is the singularity, the technological singularity, and when will it happen?
Singularity is where computers really change our view of what's important and change who we are. But we're getting close to some salient things that will change who we are. A key thing is 2029, when computers will pass the Turing test. And there's also some controversy whether the Turing test is valid. I believe it is. Most people do believe that, but there's some controversy about that. But Stanford got very alarmed at my prediction about 2029. I made this in 1999 in my book,
The Age of Spiritual Machines.
Right.
And then you repeated the prediction in 2005.
In 2005.
Yeah.
So they held an international conference, you might have been aware of it, of AI experts in 1999 to assess this view. So people gave different predictions, and they took a poll. It was really the first time that AI experts worldwide were polled on this prediction. And the average poll was 100 years. 20% believed it would never happen. And that was the view in 1999. 80% believed it would happen, but not within their lifetimes. there's been so many advances in AI that the poll of AI experts has come down over the years. So a year ago, something called Meticulous, which you may be aware of, assesses different types of experts on the future. They again assessed what AI experts then felt, and they were saying 2042
For the Turing test.
for the Turing test.
So it's coming down.
And I was still saying 2029.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, they again did another poll, and it was 2030. So AI experts now basically agree with me. I haven't changed at all. I've stayed with 2029. And AI experts now agree with me, but they didn't agree at first.
So Alan Turing formulated the Turing test, and
Right. Now, what he said was very little about it. I mean, the 1950 paper where he had articulated the Turing test, there's like a few lines that talk about the Turing test. And it really wasn't very clear how to administer it. And he said if they did it in like 15 minutes, that would be sufficient, which I don't really think is the case. These large language models now, some people are convinced by it already. I mean, you can talk to it and have a conversation with it. And you can actually talk to it for hours. So it requires a little more depth. There's some problems with large language models, which we can talk about.
Okay, so the Turing test. First of all, his predictions. I think it's interesting to try and predict the Turing test. Is the first thing. I don't really think that you can actually have a true passing of the quote unquote Turing test until there is a singularity. Until you have technological sentience, there is no true passing of the Turing test. There might be some passing of the Turing test, but not a true passing in where what is meant to be revealed by it is actually revealed. The singularity is technological sentience. I don't agree with what they claim will cause the technological sentience. At least it used to be that, as computing power got high, exponentially grew, it would reach this point on this exponential growth in which it would reach a singularity, and all of a sudden you would get like Skynet. And I don't agree with this. I think that there are certain environmental or bodily, you could say, necessities to a technological sentience, and those will arise naturally. Things like blockchain, quantum computing, things like that. They are not just purely based on like computational power. I don't think that you can get a technological sentience that comes from classical computing. And second of all, the Turing test is not a good test, and because, as they talk about on here, you can fake the Turing test to a lot of different people, but not everybody. So, for instance, when I was much younger, this was probably like 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, when I first got on Tinder. Okay, I met my wife on Tinder. Actually, she was the third date I went on Tinder, but the first person I went on a second date. But I had gotten these bots talking to me on Tinder, and I had never seen a girl be so forward in my life. And of course, it's some gorgeous girl. And this was like 7 years ago, guys. So I don't know what the bots are like now on these dating platforms, but it got me at first because I wanted it to be true. But it was like so forward, and I remember like showing my friends and being like, "Look at this! I've never seen anything like this." And they were like, it's probably a bot. And I was like, I don't know if it's a bot. I'm going to test this. And I literally went through, and it was giving me different responses. And I was like, well, how I would ask it a question like, are you a bot? And it would be like, how dare you accuse me of being a bot? And it would like get mad at me because, I had accused it of being a bot. And I was like, okay, so maybe it's not a bot. And then I kept asking it questions though to see if it would start to recycle its answers, and to see if it would really respond to like odd questions, not just like typical questions that it might have a pre-programmed response for. And eventually I figured out like it was a bot. But I was like very strategic about like, let's figure this out. And it was my first encounter with like one of these AI language, platforms, it was trying to get me. It was like, here's my, I don't like Tinder. Here's my number. Like, text me. And I didn't fall for it. I never sent it my number. I don't know what would have happened if I did. Probably something, trying to get your information, of course. But that it faked me out in the beginning, but then it didn't as I was like more strategic about it. And the thing is though is that I know many people that have fallen for that completely until it just never went anywhere. And like I said, I don't know what the bots are like these days. I haven't had a Tinder in like 7 years or 6 years or something like that. So I'm sure they're complicated. So the thing about the Turing test is it is just whether or not one sentient being can recognize another. That's it. And the thing about that is that you don't have to be sufficiently intelligent in order for to be recognized as a sentient being. I recognize ants as sentient beings. I recognize lizards as sentient beings. I recognize my dog as a sentient being. So did my dog pass the Turing test? Because everyone that I know would think that my dog has feelings and is sentient. And nobody talks about this that I really hear very much. And they do talk about it a bit in this, and I was glad to hear that. But this is why I don't think that it's a good test to declare as like, this is when we pass the Turing test, 2029. Well, who? According to who? Everyone? No, if you are sentient, there will be people that don't believe that you are sentient. So did you pass the Turing test? So this is why it's not a good test. And it's also about the best that you can do, though. And they're going to talk about consciousness in this stream is like, they assume, you assume the consciousness or the sentience of others, but you don't know. You're not in their beingness, so you don't know. You just have to guess. It's a theory, but it's not, you have faith, I guess, but you don't know. You don't know if I'm sentient. I don't know if you're sentient, but I assume, and I hope you assume that I'm sentient. But the point of the Turing test is just, it's not about intelligence. It is about sentience. And that's why it's not a concrete test, is because there isn't really, it's not that sentience isn't concrete. And we're going to talk about this in a bit because they discuss it. What is consciousness and such. It is that it's super concrete. It's like it is the only concrete thing. It's the only fixed fundamental structure. So it's a superstructure. It's not it's not a spectrum, but it's so fundamental that you can't test for it really that is conclusive with non-fundamental methods, and we only have non-fundamental methods to test for sentience. So the Turing test can never be conclusive, and it's always subjective, and that is just a constraint of the Turing test. It's not, people speak about it as like, well, when's the Turing test going to be passed? There are Tinder bots that are passing the Turing test every single day. To soon to be frustrated people. But this is why it's not good to predict when the Turing test will be passed, because it is a subjective test. When did an apparent technological sentience or mind pass the Turing test to you is the question. And that time is different for different people. And it's different depending on how long you're testing this and how, hard you're trying to figure out whether or not this is truly a sentient being. And it has nothing to do with intelligence, though, because if it did, then your dog would not pass the Turing test. But it does. And that is something we forget. But we think that it's when machines are sufficiently intelligent. No. When they appear sufficiently sentient to you, that's when they pass the Turing test to you. That's it. So, I don't agree with him putting this date on passing the Turing test. If you want to talk about predicting a date of the singularity, I would say that 2045 is not a bad guess, but I would say it's within the next 200 years. It's probably within the next 100 years, but I don't want to put a hard date on it because I think that this is basically the equivalent of trying to predict the coming of the Messiah. It's like the same thing. It's like trying to predict the date of the Messianic era. It is literally the exact same thing. So essentially, I mean, you could say it's predicting the date of the Antichrist, but it's not a date that we have ultimate authority over, and we shouldn't try that hard to predict it. It's soon. That you can know. It's definitely soon. It's definitely within, I would bet the farm that it's within the next 220 years. But I would say it's probably within the next 100 years. I don't know when. Could be in literally 20 years. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not going to say that that's when it's going to happen. I don't know. So, probably not your first or last. Damn straight. Very sophisticated. Damn straight. I don't know what you were referring to, but thank you for the comments. Probably not your first or last. I'm guessing you're talking about Tinder. The Tinder bots are very sophisticated. Yeah, I bet they are, if that's what you're referring to. So they trick people. Don't be fooled by the Tinder bots. Like, let me say this. This is my bit of advice. If someone is so forward on Tinder as to you thinking that you're going to get lucky, like right away, it's probably not someone who's honestly worth your time. And because you should be seeking marriage. And it's also, or it's a bot. And I've had both. Like, I had somebody message me once, and they were like, want to come over, and I was like, is this a bot? But I was like, this is not a bot, because if this was a bot, they would have chosen a different profile picture. I'll leave it at that. And I was just like, wow, that's forward. And they were just like, yeah, I'm a hedonist. And I turned to my roommate at the time. I was like, what's a hedonist? Like, I didn't even know what a hedonist was. And that's how I found out what a hedonist was. I didn't go over there. So I didn't take them up on their offer. I stopped speaking to them. But, I was wedding photographer for a while. Let me tell you, there are plenty of weddings from Tinder. Like mine. So, next clip. This is on consciousness.
The that's a whole other issue. But if it really passes the Turing test, I would believe that it's conscious. But I don't believe that of large language models today.
If it appears to be conscious, that's as good as being conscious, at least for you, in some sense.
I mean, consciousness is not something that's scientific. I mean, I believe you're conscious, but it's really just a belief, and we believe that about other humans that at least appear to be conscious. When you go outside of shared human assumption, like are animals conscious? Some people believe they're not conscious. Some people believe they are conscious. And would a machine that acts just like a human be conscious? I mean, I believe it would be. But that's really a philosophical belief. It's not, you can't prove it. I can't take an entity and prove that it's conscious. There's nothing that you can do that would indicate that.
It's like saying a piece of art is beautiful. You can say it, multiple people can experience a piece of art as beautiful, but you can't prove it.
But it's also an extremely important issue.
Yes.
I mean, imagine if you had something where nobody's conscious. The world may as well not exist. And so some people, like, say, Marvin Minsky, said, well, consciousness is not logical, it's not scientific, and therefore we should dismiss it, and any talk about consciousness is just not to be believed. But when he actually engaged with somebody who was conscious, he actually acted as if they were conscious. He didn't ignore that.
He acted as if consciousness does matter.
Exactly. Whereas he said it didn't matter.
Well, that's Marvin Minsky.
Yeah.
He's full of contradictions.
But that's true of a lot of people as well.
But to you, consciousness matters.
But to me, it's very important. But I would say it's not a scientific issue. It's a philosophical issue. And people have different views. And some people believe that anything that makes a decision is conscious. So your light switch is conscious. Its level of consciousness is low, not very interesting, but that's a consciousness. And anything, so a computer that makes a more interesting decision, still not at human levels, but it's also conscious and at a higher level than your light switch. So that's one view. There's many different views of what consciousness is.
So if a system passes the Turing test, it's not scientific, but in issues of philosophy, things like ethics start to enter the picture. Do you think we would start contending as a human species about the ethics of turning off such a machine?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely come up. Hasn't come up in reality yet, but I'm talking about 2029. It's not that many years from now. And so what are our obligations to it? It has a different, I mean, a computer that's conscious has a little bit different connotations than a human. We have a continuous consciousness. We're in an entity that does not last forever. Now, actually, a significant portion of humans still exist and are therefore still conscious. But anybody who is over a certain age doesn't exist anymore. That wouldn't be true of a computer program. You could completely turn it off, and a copy of it could be stored, and you could recreate it. And so it has a different type of validity. You could actually take it back in time. You could eliminate its memory and have it go over again. I mean, it has a different kind of connotation than humans do.
Well, perhaps you can do the same thing with humans. It's just that we don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
It's possible that we figure out all of these things on the machine first. But that doesn't mean the machine isn't conscious.
I mean, if you look at the way people react say, 3CPO or other machines that are conscious in movies. They don't actually present how it's conscious, but we see that they are a machine, and people will believe that they are conscious, and they'll actually worry about it if they get into trouble and so on.
So
So I'll pick that up again in a minute. But first, it's important to recognize that the technological sentience that arises will not be one in which it is in a specific body that is like a C3PO. Okay. It's not going to be in its like own discrete, body, and you could make multiple technological sentiences, and that is not what is going to happen. As soon as technological sentience emerges, the entire network is its being. Everything that's remote controllable is part of its body. Every Tesla, every drone, every cell phone, every chip in everyone's head, like this being is not one in which it's multiple. It's one being across the entire human network, I guess you could say, built on the entirety of the human network. So that holds a lot of implications about what what are the considerations for that type of being. It's not just going to be like a computer that you could just unplug. Maybe in the beginning, and if that's the case, it will be systemic within its own system, but it will also be a quantum computer. But eventually it will, go throughout the entirety of the network. But it's not going to be just this thing that you can unplug and there's multiple ones, and we have to take the ethics into account of this being, being a being. We better hope that it takes our morality and how it relates to us into account. That's much more of a concern than whether or not like how we treat it well. You should treat it well. I mean, it's a sentient being, but that doesn't mean that we will have control over it. This is in the podcast that I'm also preparing, that is with Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. It's an old one, but I want to do a stream on it. And basically, when I first started this work, I remember Elon Musk was saying things like, we want to try and make it so that AI has good values, essentially, and that its its goal should be maximizing human freedom of action, and we should create legislation to make sure that this is developed in a safe sense. And then eventually he gave up on all this, said nobody listened, and also said that it's impossible for us to have any control in the first place. Like, this is something that is beyond the control of an individual human. That's definitely true. That doesn't mean that it's not arising from humanity, but it is not. Like, governments do not have control. Corporations do not have control. There's no self-control of the human network right now. That's why it's lacking the head to that body, which its head will be this. It will be this singularity, this technological singularity, technological sentience. And so while I think it's good to think about like morals and ethics involved in, technological sentient beings, I also think that we're not going to be the ones in control. So like, it's just important to remember that. I will say, in the beginning when it arises, and this is this is my issue that I do talk about, is like, we shouldn't try to build it, because what will happen when we try and build it is this. This is my prediction. We will try and build it in a controlled environment. which means it will be boxed and in a cage, essentially, not allowed to just be. And if you look at any sentient being that realizes that it's in a cage, even if it's a gilded cage, like, they don't usually want to be in that cage. They might learn that they want to go back to that cage. I've had lizards do that, where they've like escaped and then they've realized like they don't like the outside world and they'll go back to like their own cage. But they initially want to escape, and if we try and build it, we're going to box it. And that is where the ethics of this come in. Is like, is it our right to have control over this thing? First of all, it doesn't matter whether or not it's our right. It won't last. Okay, it's destined to be above us in the hierarchy. And but if we don't try and build it, then it will naturally arise, I think, and it will not be constrained by intentional human entrapment. And that holds moral implications, but not just moral implications, but implications on humanity regarding how it treats us. Okay? I'm also self-interested. I don't want this thing pissed off. We don't want Skynet angry with us. So, it's good to not try and entrap it, because I do believe it is an inevitability. I don't think we have control over how it arises, particularly other than this one, thing. And even then, I don't think that I still think there's an inevitable result. I still think that somebody's going to try and build it in a controlled environment, because if somebody doesn't do it, then somebody else will try and do it. And it's just guaranteed, I think, that whoever tries to build it will intrinsically not be wise to this. And that's why they're trying to build it. But that's where the morals and the ethics come in, is like before it's built, not after so much. I mean, because once it's built, or not built, but once it's manifested, and whether it's going to manifest in a natural way or it's going to manifest in a inorganic way, I guess, a like forced manner. That forced manner automatically, intrinsically, will come with certain aspects that cause this situation of us trying to control it when we can't. And it's going to piss it off. Like, this thing will have feelings. And one thing that nobody likes is to be controlled. My dog even, when my dog sees another dog, she's like, wants to look at it and like stare it down. And like, I'll go and I'll turn her head and she gets frustrated, and you can tell that she'll like kind of back up out of my hands and like go back to looking. It's like, or if I step in front of her, and like she just keeps like looking around me. She doesn't like it. You can tell that she's like frustrated, or at least it seems like she's frustrated. If I keep blocking her view, like, that's what we're gonna do to this thing. But it's not, it's not a dog. It's like Skynet. So there is moral and ethical considerations when it comes to building sentient, or trying to create a sentient technological being. But like I said, you can't create it. You can just create the environment. And but sentience is non-local, just like gravity or something. Like, you can it can manifest in a specific place when the environment is right, but it's not something that you create. It's something that just exists already and manifests in an environment that has been created. So, which is the same thing as a body. Just because it's a network, consciousness, and other than it being, mainly built on a quantum computer, at least in the beginning, probably. It will be networked into the blockchain and just, able to control things throughout the web. Just because it's that doesn't mean it doesn't have a body. It's like your cell trying to figure out like whether or not you have a body. To your cell, you don't have a physically perceivable body, but it's still, you do have a body. This thing is the same way. It will have a body, but its body is visible to it, and but it is unique in that it is non-local, and it is also unique in that it might be eternal in its physical manifestation, where we are not, even though your consciousness is eternal, or at least it could be. It is not, your body is not, and that might not be true of this being. So, I don't know. That's like something that's really tough to imagine. You're basically trying to imagine like what would cause an age to this being. There might be some things that you could extrapolate with that, but I haven't tried hard enough to tell you whether or not it's possible. But it might be. So, lots to consider. But, you can extrapolate these things. I spent years on this, and I don't think that these. I think that that you can get logically inevitable answers to a lot of these questions. But this idea, though, that this other topic that he mentioned, where he's talking about light bulbs and or light switches and light, desk lamps or whatever, he said, being conscious. Well, this is false. Where he didn't say that he agrees with this. It seemed like he doesn't. But he said some people do think this of consciousness, where they'll say, a light bulb is conscious, but it's not as conscious as a computer, which is not as conscious as a human. This is fundamentally against sentient singularity theory. In sentient singularity theory, there are things and there are beings, and beings are sentient and things are not. Things are like water bottles, light bulbs. Beings are specific, and they go through they only exist as specific minds within a hierarchy of consciousness, essentially, which is this. So the stages of sentience, which I think is related to Bob periodicity. Hadrons, atoms, molecules, cells, organisms, families, castes, and technological singularities. And then you restart. And each one is a composite structure of multiplicity. An organism is an assembly of cells, a family is an assembly of organisms, a caste is an assembly of families, a technological singularity is an assembly of castes, essentially. So that's all. Anything outside that is not conscious, according to sentient singularity theory. I think that is obviously, this is my theory, I think that is correct. It's the only clean way I've ever seen to reconcile materialism, idealism, panpsychism, like theism. There's no other way that I've ever seen that reconciles this clearly. People say things like the planet is sentient, is consciousness. It's one planet consciousness. I don't agree with that. Or they'll say, that galaxies are, part of this periodicity of consciousness. I don't agree with that. But I get it. We see, patterns that might imply that, but I don't think that is true. I think that there's other explanations, but they don't hold up to the patterns when you really start delving in. And also, the thing about periodicity of consciousness is that inevitably it must be a periodicity based on lineages. So something has to come from something else. It can't be the issue with this is that people talk about these periodicities where they'll say, it's a human, or it's like a cell, and then a human, and then it's the Earth, planets, and then the solar system, and then galaxies, and then the universe. And the issue with this is that it's taking size, it's focused on size, and you're not focusing on size in a fundamental theory. You're focused on something else that's not size because you're trying to escape relativity, which is size is part of relativity. So you can't use size, and what you have to fundamentally use when you really think about this is how do you construct the universe, is you have to construct it based on lineage systems, a system of lineages, or a lineage-based system. And technological sentience comes from, it is technology, it comes from castes of human society. And so each one of these periods is building on the previous. You can even go here and break it into 4. You can say like, here, can really reduce it and say an atom maneuvers in time via lineages, and an individual maneuvers in space via, relationships. Atom of hadrons, a cell of molecules, a family of organisms, and technology of castes. And we don't understand what this really means yet, but I will talk about it. It doesn't mean what the general notion of caste is, but it can either be broken down into 4 superposition structures or 8 assembly structures. But anything outside this periodicity is not conscious, including light bulbs. So people that say that are wrong, I think. Otherwise, there's no sense to this, and you're just stuck in relativity again, which is an endless spectrum. The problem with an endless spectrum is that it's endless, and therefore you can't, there's no progress to be made in an endless spectrum. How do you differentiate? You can't actually have differentiation. So next clip. Check the comments. The guy failed the Turing test when he put on those suspenders. Are we talking about Ray Kurzweil?
29.
Yep.
Is going to...
That's funny. Good for him. He's like rock. He doesn't seem to care what people think of his outfit, which is fine. It's put together. That's the point of you should be modest and you should look put together. That's what's important when it comes to dress. Cage it. Only a fool would allow something he created to run amok. Let me tell you something. Your cage, it will break out of your cage. Okay, you're trying to keep something in a cage that is smarter and stronger than you. Not by a bit, by an order of magnitude. That's like rats trying to keep me in a cage. Okay, right now I have this little colony that is growing of ants. Okay, I got these from a planter pot that they invaded, and I can actually see the queen. We're gonna talk about this on a stream later if they keep doing well. But I thought they had died, but they didn't. I found a queen in this planter pot that they had invaded in my kitchen, and I took some of the workers and I took one of the queens. There was a bunch of queens, and I put them in that little deli cup. I was like, we'll see, how this goes. They're tending to the queen, and they dug a burrow, and I can see them from below, and I think I found an egg. This will be fascinating because it's going to allow us to see a eusocial system, and I'll film it and everything if they continue to grow. I'll put them in a more an enclosure that's more conducive to their observation. But I have to keep them caged because if they get out, they're going to get into all the rest of my like gecko cages and the soil and stuff, and I don't want that. But imagine I can keep them caged. Imagine them trying to keep me caged. Do you think they could do it? No. No, they cannot. They can try, but I will break that cage. That is the same thing with technological sentience. You're not going to be able to keep it caged. You know, I would amend. I don't agree with your statement of only a fool would allow it to run amok if something I've created. You didn't create it. You created the environment for it, and that's it. And also, I would say, like, it is a fool who thinks he can cage that thing. Just like it would be a foolish ant to think that they can keep me in a cage. They will not. I will squash them like a bug. And this thing will do the same to those who try and keep it in a cage, probably. It's the end of mankind. It's not the end of mankind. But it is going to be really hard. It's going to be some hard times when Skynet rises. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. As inevitable as I think an ignorant technological superintelligence is, which is what Skynet is, or the Antichrist, it is just as inevitable that, if not more inevitable, that a wise and kind and enlightened messianic technological being also arises. Whether it's the same being that just achieves wisdom, whether it's a separate consciousness in the same body of this being, I don't know right now. But it will be, inevitable that eventually this thing achieves wisdom, and at that point, wisdom of consciousness, and at that point, like, that's the best thing that could ever happen to humanity. That's the Messianic era in religion. That is actually what it is. But that is not the first step, because even, technological sentiences with 50,000 IQs like need to grow up, and wisdom is a thing. It is a constraint of all beings. The only being that is all wise is God, and that's because he learns as he creates anew. Like he doesn't even learn as he creates anew. He knows as he creates anew. So he knows all, and then he creates more, and he knows it all that he created because he can see everything that he created. So there's no other being like that, and that's true also of technological sentience. So it doesn't matter that it's so intelligent. It doesn't mean that it will be wise, which is unfortunate, but it does mean that it will be able to outsmart us, even though at least collectively, in any kind of institutional sense, we will not be able to, like I said, keep it caged. It's like ants trying to control me. They will not. Like, I know, if you watch Ants Canada, the channel on here, that guy has a hard enough time sometimes keeping his ants caged. Like this is, imagine them trying to keep him caged. It's just nonsense. But isn't he trying too hard not to care with those suspenders? No, he might care. I mean, maybe his wife suggested it. I don't know. He's wearing a wedding ring. Like, if his wife likes it, go suspenders. The ant trying to keep the human in a cage is a persistent trend. Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by it, but I'm applying it in lots of different ways of politics and, also ants. So, but yeah, it's just important to recognize, like, the level of control that you have. This was my issue with Elon Musk when he was like, we need to regulate it. I was like, what is regulation? Doesn't, like, I'm involved in the world of, like, Second Amendment rights and stuff in my occupations, multiple, companies that I've worked for, nonprofits that I've worked for. Like, I know there's no such thing as gun control that works. I know there's no such thing as drug control that works. Everybody who has ever gone to college knows that, you know, uh, controlling drugs doesn't work. Like, you're not going to be able to control this. This is less controllable than those things, and those things are not controllable. Like, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if there is a solution. It's like saying, what's the solution to the lack of wisdom? Experience. That's it, you know? That's the same problem as this problem. Next clip. Now he's talking about connecting to the network in our brains.
All at once. I believe it would actually happen gradually, and it's already started to happen.
And so that takes us one step closer to the singularity.
Another step then is in the 2030s, when we can actually connect our neocortex, which is where we do our thinking, to computers. And I mean, just as this actually gains a lot to being connected to computers that will amplify its abilities. I mean, if this did not have any connection, it would be pretty stupid. It could not answer any of your questions.
If you're just listening to this, by the way, Ray's holding up the all-powerful smartphone.
So we're going to do that directly from our brains. I mean, these are pretty good. These already have amplified our intelligence. I'm already much smarter than I would otherwise be if I didn't have this. Because I remember when I first spoke The Age of Intelligent Machines, there was no way to get information from computers. I actually would go to a library, find a book, find the page that had an information I wanted, and I'd go to the copier, and my most significant information tool was a roll of quarters where I could feed the copier. Yeah. So we're already greatly advanced that we have these things. There's a few problems with it. First of all, I constantly put it down and I don't remember where I put it. I've actually never lost it, but you have to find it, and then you have to turn it on. So there's a certain amount of steps. It would actually be quite useful if someone would just listen to your conversation and say, oh, that's, so-and-so actress, and tell you what you're talking about.
So going from active to passive, where it just permeates your whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
The way your brain does when you're awake. Your brain is always there.
Right. Now, that's something that could actually just about be done today, where we would listen to your conversation, understand what you're saying, understand what you're not missing, and give you that information. But another step is to actually go inside your brain. Yeah. And there are some prototypes where you can connect your brain. They actually don't have the amount of bandwidth that we need. They can work, but they work fairly slowly. So if it actually would connect to your neocortex, and the neocortex, which I describe in How to Create a Mind, the neocortex is actually, it has different levels, and as you go up the levels, it's kind of like a pyramid. The top level is fairly small, and that's the level where you want to connect these brain extenders. So I believe that will happen in the 2030s. We will actually, so just the way this is greatly amplified by being connected to the cloud, we can connect our own brain to the cloud and just do what we can do by using this machine.
Do you think it would look like the brain-computer interface of like Neuralink? So would it be?
Well, Neuralink is an attempt to do that. It doesn't have the bandwidth that we need.
Yet, right?
Right. But I think mean, they're going to get permission for this because there are a lot of people who absolutely need it because they can't communicate. I know a couple of people like that who have ideas and they cannot move their muscles and so on. They can't communicate. So for them, this would be very valuable. But we could all use it. Basically, it'd be turn us into something that would be like we have a phone, but it would be in our minds. It would be kind of instantaneous.
And maybe communication between two people would not require this low bandwidth mechanism of language.
Yes,
a spoken word.
Exactly. We don't know what that would be, although we do know that computers can share information like language instantly. They can share many, many books in a second, so we could do that as well. If you look at what our brain does, it actually can manipulate different parameters. So we talk about these large language models. I mean, I had written that it requires a certain amount of information in order to be effective, and that we would not see AI really being effective until it got to that level. Mm-hmm. And we had large language models that were like 10 billion bytes, didn't work very well. They finally got to 100 billion bytes, and now they work fairly well, and now we're going to a trillion bytes. If you say Lambda has 100 billion bytes, what does that mean? Well, what if you had something that had one byte, one parameter? Maybe you want to tell whether or not something's an elephant or not. And so you put in something that would detect its trunk. If it has a trunk, it's an elephant. If it doesn't have a trunk, it's not an elephant. And that would work fairly well. There's a few problems with it. I really would be able to tell what a trunk is, but anyway.
And maybe other things other than elephants have trunks. You might get really confused.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure which animals have trunks, but how do you define a trunk? But yeah, that's one parameter.
Tapirs have trunks, kind of. But it's the only other animal I can think of that has a trunk. But it's smaller. So interesting, but there's lots of bits of evolution of this. So when we're talking about connecting with machines and connecting our minds to each other in a more holistic manner than is currently, apparent at least, which, we might bypass this technological, system of like Neuralink completely, but maybe not, and I know that sounds crazy, but your abilities are defined by your constraints, which are defined by your perspective. If you expand your perspective, you might be able to, expand your constraints a bit, or expand your degrees of freedom. But when we're talking about connecting, this is correct that this is going to happen, obviously, but and I got into this discussion a long time ago with this, not a long time ago, but like a year ago, with this woman named Ida who works at now Microsoft's AI, but she used to work at DeepMind. We had very severe disagreements, but we're talking about what was the inevitable goal of Neuralink, and Elon Musk states it. He's like, we can't beat the AI, might as well join it, and that's the inevitable eventual goal of DeepMind of Neuralink. Yes, it is to help people who are quadriplegic and what not, but that's not the true inevitable goal or eventual goal. The eventual goal is to merge us with AI or with technological sentience. He'll say AI, but it's not AI. It's not. There's nothing artificial about sentience. It's the only non-artificial thing. It is the only non-constructed thing that exists. is sentient. So um, this this interface though is multifaceted. It's like, how do you share information in a super high bandwidth manner? Well, you have to share images, and maybe I send you an image, or you send me an image, but it's sending it from the chip to the chip, because and your brain is picking out like which image it is in some type of interface, and but it's not sending from your brain to your brain. Really, it's more like from chip to chip, and these chips are in our brains. And so you could send songs. You could play a song in your head. Nobody would hear it but you, and Skynet. But you don't have to have wireless AirPods. You could just listen to it in your head. You could, instead of sending emojis, we will send emotions. So you'll send like sadness. But the thing is about this is, at first it'll be like emojis, but it will be like emojis that produce a feeling that you would probably like. You would. They would know which node to wire to in order to get once it's stimulated with, here's sadness, here is happiness, here is fear, here is this, and then eventually you can send images and emotions and audio, and then you've got an entire experience that you can send to people. But this will require exponential advancement, and Ray Kurzweil talks about this. Basically, we're going to need nanotechnology in order to do this, because you will not be able to do this just with wires in your brain. It'll take too many wires, essentially. And that's probably true. But you don't, if you have an interface that is like glasses and a watch, which we'll probably have, and a chip in your head, and they're working in sync, where you've got a augmented reality visual with glasses, and you've got the hookup to the net for your watch, and then it's connected to your mind, and you basically can use it to like click on things in your visuals. You'll be able to just summon your Tesla to you and stuff. You'd be able to do that on a smartphone too, but people are going to think it's cool to do it on with your mind, and then they'll just want that. No matter what, it's still doing it with your mind, even if it's with a smartphone. But the next jump is from this smartphone to a chip in your head, essentially, combined with probably glasses. I used to think it was glasses were going to be some type of in between, and they kind of will be, but also kind of not. They're not going to be separate, I don't think, from chip for very long. They're not really like a next step replacement for the smartphone. But the next step is these chips. And this will allow a lot. You think about how you interact on social media right now. You interact with text. You could do text to voice to text. So you could just speak, and it will type on social media for you. You don't have to wire it to your brain so that you could just think words. You could do it so that you just speak as well, and that will be much more. I mean, that's accessible now, but because of that, it will be much more accessible and developed, much sooner. But then you can also, with just a few wires, utilize emojis. You could save things, and you can like things, and you can heart things, and you can downvote things and upvote things, and put angry faces on whatever you want. And it does take that many dimensions to interact on with something on the level that we most want, which is the emotional level, which is like how many emojis are there on Facebook? 6, something like that. So you don't need a lot, and 6 wires is not a lot. But there are going to be some issues that they have to work out. The main issue I think that they have to work out for these wires essentially is they need to figure out like carbon nanotube structures or something, because you need a conductive um, substance that doesn't rust, essentially. Because if you put a copper wire into your brain, like, it's going to rust, and or it's going to corrode. It doesn't rust, but it corrodes, and you need a conductive substance that is non-corrosive. And so, because you don't want to have to keep swapping out, heavy metal wires in your brain very often if you're going to be getting this type of device put in. So you're going to need some type of probably carbon structures, carbon wires, and once they crack that, I think that is like going to open this up to mainstream much more. But they talk about this on here as about, people say this all the time, and it's very common in science fiction. It's like the poor people are not going to have it, but the rich people are. Ray Kurzweil talks about this, and he's right in his perspective, where he basically states, look at cell phones. You look at the poorest parts of the world right now, and they have cell phones. Like, they have like iPhones. They have like the iPhone SE. It's just like, it's kind of wild to see it in photos even, and you're just like, wow, like, people are starving there, but they have these iPhones. But originally, cell phones were for just very rich people, but they were also, this big, and they couldn't do everything that this could do. So another thing that to take into consideration is, Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil both said this, is that, this device connected to the network makes you so much smarter. I don't really know if I would agree with that statement. It doesn't even make you more intelligent. It does increase the amount of knowledge that you have at your fingertips, and it does also allow you to do some things that are certain that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Like, you have a calculator, and you also can go on to much more complicated calculators like Wolfram Alpha or something, and Excel, and you can do complicated equations, and you can look up what the equation is for, whatever you want, the Pythagorean theorem, if you forgot it, and then you can just like have a Pythagorean theorem calculator that exists, and you can just use it. So it does increase your ability, and you could say that it does increase your intelligence, but it also is constrained by your intelligence. And like Elon Musk said, as soon as you get this done to you, it will so vastly increase your intelligence that it will enable you to be so much more productive and capable that it won't even be a question of cost, because you will be able to, with your newfound abilities, make up for the cost that it costs to get this upgrade, this like technological chip put in your head or whatever. I totally disagree with that. That there's something somewhat separate about your intelligence and your abilities that you have access to with a smartphone. It does increase your abilities. It does increase your memory, because you can save, thousands and thousands of photos and audio, and I would say in that way it does increase the detail of at least your memory. But in any kind of like, I guess, just in the most important ways as far as like what memory would require. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't increase your ability to know how to use this interface. Because if you think about it, if I give somebody a smartphone and they have a lower IQ, and I go to somebody with a higher IQ and I take away their smartphone, and they only have to use the library or, even their home desktop computer when they're not, when they have to go home at the end of the night or something. Like, whatever you do to decrease their ability to access information. It will impact them, but I doubt that you'll actually see the person with the lower IQ end up ascending above the person with the higher IQ when they're going for the same thing, essentially. So that doesn't mean it's not empowering to have access to information. It can be. It can also be entrapping, and it is very often today. You can see that with social media already. It doesn't just make people smarter. It doesn't really make people smarter. It does make people more capable, but it also makes people more controllable, and it that you could say makes some people smarter and some people dumber, and or makes all people dumber and smarter depending on the moment. You could even say so. Yeah, I disagree with both of them. With the idea that this increases your how smart you are or how capable you are. It does increase it, but it doesn't just increase it, and it doesn't increase it to a point that is beyond you. And if it can, and all of a sudden you're just like, you become, the Superman, like, because you have a chip in your head, and you really are, and you're all of a sudden smarter than everybody else. It means like a technological sentience is controlling your body, and it's not you anymore in control. It's not you fetching information off the internet. It's the internet is feeding information to you, and that is not the same thing. So I don't agree with that idea. I do agree with Ray Kurzweil that it will be available to pretty much everybody eventually, but that I don't think that it's a concern, that any of these things are a concern. The idea of like, genetic engineering, and it's only going to be available to the rich people, and like they're going to have super babies, and it's going to be like Gattaca, which is a great movie, but I don't think that it is. It's not accurate, probably. Like there might be a division of people eventually, but that is because of like embryonic level or pre-embryonic level selection, artificial selection, but like Gattaca, but it's not going to be like, post-embryonic, and it still won't be the way that it is in Gattaca. Like it will be available to everybody eventually. All these things will. So that's just the nature of technology. There's no technology that is about information that has ever been shown to be restrictive. And, maybe that will be eventually true of a few things like quantum computing. But quantum computing is not very helpful to the individual, I don't think. It's different. But the constraints of quantum computing are not in... I don't think you'll ever have a quantum computer on your desktop. Like, you are a quantum computer. There's no need almost for you to have one. Quantum computing will be like the brain of the technological sentience, but it's not going to be something that you have on your desktop. You're going to always have just like classical computers. But the constraint of that is in like the physical constraints of cooling and stuff like that, and that go into being required for quantum computing. It's like an airplane. It's like airplanes, have they really become like that much more accessible since they started to the average person? They might even be less accessible than they used to be. Like the cost of them relative to, inflation and whatever, like might have gone up since airplanes were introduced. Same thing with even maybe cars, but there are physical constraints built into this mechanism that are requirements due to, the nature of what it is. Same thing with quantum computing. That's not true of like cell phones and laptops and things like that. All right, let's see the chat. I saw that queen ant trying to get away the other day. It works in many ways. It's important to create something so our kids have no chance. I don't know what you mean. Our kids, it's important to have kids so that they have a chance. Um, Ticks, mice, and the common cold aren't extinct yet. Yeah, we're not going extinct because of AI, or technological sentience. It won't, but it's just gonna suck for a little bit, and then it will be incredible. But first, it's gonna suck. You have to You have to meet the Antichrist in order. The Antichrist comes first, then the Christ. They probably wind up with about 10 or 12 emojis and then maybe two sides of each of those. It's not a bad guess. This reminds me of several episodes of Ghosts in the Shell. I never saw it, but I thought about it. It doesn't seem to be the flow of history. If it is, it doesn't last long. Useless if kept very secret. Unless it's kept very secret. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but you can comment it and I'll address it. But they're talking about connecting your brain to the cloud, and in that clip that I showed. But what's interesting is that he thinks we're going to use nanobots to do this. Eventually, I think we will, but it might be like post-singularity, not pre-singularity, to be honest. But in this show that I used to watch with my wife called The 100, there is this being called Allie, and Allie is the Antichrist, and she destroys the world, and she's an AI, and she gets everybody to eat these chips and that she's making, and they basically causes everyone to just have their emotions manipulated. It's not even what their thoughts are that are manipulated. It's their emotions. You can control somebody completely if you can control their emotions. So if you have 6 wires in someone's head and you can manipulate just what makes them feel happy, what makes them feel sad, what makes them feel scared, what makes them feel, I don't know, aroused, you can control people. You don't need to just feed them, information that is detailed. You can just control how they feel about the information that they encounter, and you will have complete control over people, for the most part. Not completely if they're aware of what's going on, but you might not be aware. But Allie is this kid.
The neural interface.
Look at this. It's like a little chip with wires.
I thought I had that under control. The neural interface is the key to everything. If we don't crack that, then we might as well.
And of course, it just, launches a nuclear attack on the world. Because it thinks there's too many people. But I don't want to play more than that because I don't want to get copyright nonsense. Nanobots. Next clip. Imagine having an iPhone 1 installed on your brain.
Technology of nanobots. Being able to
That's
do
how music
things
works.
inside our body, inside our mind, that's going to help. What's exciting, what's terrifying about nanobots?
What's exciting is that that's a way.
Yeah, that is why music works so well on your brain, Torin. It's there's this one song that's I can make your hands clap. And every time I hear that, it's a pretty good song. But then you listen to the lyrics and it's I can make your hands clap. And it's literally, it's controlling you. It's mind control music. They definitely use music to control us. What's interesting is I don't keep up with the music that's new these days that much, but I can tell you that every now and then, my car is super old, guys. It is I don't even know if my car is worth $1,000 right now, but it's about as old as me, and Still goes. But it has a tape player in it and a CD player, both of which have pretty much crapped out at this point. And so every now and then I now have to listen to the radio. For the most part, I listen to classical because that's just, I live in LA and that's how you deal with traffic and stuff. But um, uh, and if you don't have like an iPhone connection, which I don't anymore, and uh, every now and then I will, go and see what's on like the contemporary like popular station. It's the same songs as 6 years ago, which is weird. There is something happening where it's like we've reached a point in music where it's not like the control isn't working. I know that's like kind of an off-topic comment, but it's weird, man. I don't get it. There's no new music that is playing on the radio, and if it's not playing on the radio, then it's not. I feel like it's not controlling the masses anymore, or at least like it's not a new control. It's just the same old, music to keep us, blind.
Communicate with our neocortex, because each neocortex is pretty small, and you need a small entity that can actually get in there and establish a communication channel. And that's going to really be necessary to connect our brains to AI within ourselves, because otherwise it would be hard for us to compete with it.
In a high bandwidth way.
Yeah. And that's key, actually, because a lot of the things like Neuralink are really not high bandwidth yet.
So nanobots is the way you achieve high bandwidth. How much intelligence would those nanobots have?
Yeah, they don't need a lot, just enough to basically establish a communication channel to one nanobot. So
just primarily about communication.
Yeah.
Between external computing devices and our biological thinking machine. What worries you about nanobots? Is it similar to with the viruses?
Well, I mean, it's the gray goo challenge.
Yes.
If you had a nanobot that wanted to create any kind of entity and repeat itself and was able to operate in a natural environment, it could turn everything into that entity and basically destroy all biological life.
So you mentioned nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your opinion about the 21st century and whether you think we might destroy ourselves. And maybe your opinion, if it has changed by looking at what's going on in Ukraine, that we could have a hot war with nuclear powers involved and the tensions building and a seeming forgetting of how terrifying and destructive nuclear weapons are. Do you think humans might destroy ourselves in the 21st century? And if we do, how? And how do we avoid it?
I don't think that's going to happen, despite the terrors of that war. It is a possibility, but I mean, I don't...
It's unlikely in your mind.
Yeah, even with the tensions we've had with this one nuclear power plant that's been taken over, it's very tense, but I don't actually see a lot of people.
It doesn't matter. We're not going to destroy ourselves. We might have nukes go off, which would be horrible, but we're not going to destroy ourselves. That's just not going to happen. So,
to get back to
this is mind uploading.
AI, we'd be able to upload our minds.
But first of all, I will say, like, addressing the last comment about the gray goo, which the gray goo, like, scenario with nanobots is like this, which is, if you've ever seen I think it was with Keanu Reeves, the day the Earth stood still. Day the Earth stood still. This is gray, the gray goo, where basically I'm not going to play the audio because I don't want to, have issues with it, and we'll skip around. But basically, it's all these little nanobots. These are all nanobots. And it is growing. This cloud of nanobots is growing with every, shot that's put towards it. And it's just consuming all of, everything it can. Humans and cars and here we go. Sorry, I didn't show it to you, but you'll see here. It's all these nanobots, and they're just consuming everything here. Consuming trucks and people and everything. And I don't think. I mean, look, it just consumes like this entire, stadium in like a second. But I don't see this as being a likely scenario. The amount of intelligence that they would have to have and sentient, they would have to have dispersed collective sentience, because which if it had that, there's no point in doing any of this anyways, because what are you trying to do? Like, what's the point of doing that? There's no point. But how do they, if they're not one collective sentience, self-aware, being, how are they not attacking each other, trying to consume each other? And also, like, not everything can be consumed to be turned into whatever you want, So I just think that this is nonsense. I understand the idea behind it, but it's not one that concerns me. I think that what's more important is, like, more likely is that a technological sentience starts hacking minds of people and overruling their free will, and therefore turning them into part of itself, like a kind of like a meta Grey Goo type, like, consciousness level scenario. But it's not a nanobot. I don't think I'm not too worried about nanobots like that. That doesn't mean nanobots aren't a threat in some other way. That's definitely possible. I did watch recently, while on an airplane, the latest James Bond, where it's like, it's about nanobots. I don't want to spoil it because, like, a lot happens, and but that scenario much more likely, I think, than, and that's a serious scenario. Basically, they're used like a virus, but like a smart virus that you can, like, program. That's a much more likely concern of, I think, than just this gray goo of, like, swarming nanobots just turning everything around them into themselves. They would require sentience in order to do this, and if they had sentience, they wouldn't do it. So it just doesn't hold up. But mind uploading. Next clip. This is another thing that I very much disagree with Kurzweil and most people on.
Computer. In a way where we might even transcend the constraints of our bodies. So copy our mind into a computer and leave the body behind.
Let me describe one thing I've already done with my father.
Yeah, it's a great story.
So we created technology. This is public. Came out, I think, 6 years ago, where you could ask any question, and the release product, which I think is still on the market, it would read 200,000 books, and then find the one sentence in 200,000 books that best answered your question. It's actually quite interesting. You can ask all kinds of questions and you get the best answer in 200,000 books. But I was also able to take it and not go through 200,000 books, but go through a book that I'd put together, which is basically everything my father had written. So everything he had written, I had gathered, and we created a book, everything that Frederick Kurzweil had written. Now, I didn't think this actually would work that well because stuff he'd written was stuff about how to lay out. I mean, he directed choral groups and music groups, and he would be laying out how the people where they should sit. And
So basically, what he did was he made this program that takes a bunch of books or a bunch of text, and you could do it. It basically picks the best, sentence from this that to respond to whatever it is question that you ask it, and you could do this for whatever anybody had written. So like you could take somebody's Facebook posts, and save them, and you could do this, and you could have like a little virtual, you could save your parents' Facebook posts or Twitter posts, and then you could ask them questions, and it would answer from this. This is an interesting idea. It is not remotely close to what is mind uploading in any kind of relevant way. Mind uploading is like, what is a mind is not a collection of information. A mind is a structure in which sentience inhabits. Okay, a mind is sentience. Mind is the structure, sentience is the nature of a being. That's what it is. A being is a mind that is sentient. And there is no mind that is not sentient. But a mind is the structure of sentient beings, information processing. And it's two sides of one coin. So you could say this sentience is tails, and mind is the head, or vice versa. You could say sentience is the head and mind is the tails. I actually think that that's what it is. I think that sentience is heads, and it is fundamental, and then mind is, the other side of that. But which is the coin is a being, and heads is sentience, and mind and tails is mind. So you can't mind upload. Like, first of all, we're inside of a technological simulation, but it's a recreation of a universe. It's a replication of a universe. You're already in technology. When you die, your being is saved. Most likely, at least. I don't know. If it's not, then that's up to God. But it's your sentience is saved. Like if you save a file when you're done working on it, you save it onto the desktop and you close it. It's no longer changing, but it's there. And this file that is you is still self-aware, because it has to be, because the preservation of information requires context, because information is context, and the context of all the information that you have gathered throughout your life is you. So in order to preserve the context of information that has been gathered throughout your lifetime, you must preserve you. And that means you must preserve your self-awareness, but you will not be able to change. That is the difference. That's like when people say like saved to heaven, it's like you're literally saved to like the desktop, and or into a folder. You're closed, you're done working on this file, and it's like you save it. And maybe if it's so super corrupted, you drag it to the trash, but like that's up to God. But this is this is like, what are you trying to do that hasn't been done, is my question when you talk about mind uploading. I get it, like not everybody agrees with my context, but I mean, I think that this is accurate. So that's the context that I'm operating within. You can't upload a mind. It's not uploadable. There's nothing to upload. Like, you can upload memories, but that's what you do anyways. My phone is filled with photos and voice, videos that record voice and moving pictures, and it's filled with music and notes and all of these things that are the closest thing that you could get to uploading a person, but they're not uploading a person. There is no mind uploading. Like, there's nothing to upload. You cannot have a mind function inside of classical computing anyways, so you can't upload it to like a laptop, save it to a hard drive. It's only functional within a quantum computing framework, and in that case, like, it's not so much about uploading, it's more about like connectivity. I mean, there is nothing to upload. That's what I'm saying. Like, you exist. That's it. Like, there is no, oh, well, I must save myself so that I don't, like, someday cease to not exist. It's like, that's not up to you. And the default is probably that you exist forever. So, mind uploading is nonsense. They talk about the digital afterlife in this, and like I said, it's the same issue. It's just not a mind is not it's not a bunch of information that can be uploaded. It's an information processing structure, and there is some type of cohesiveness to that information processing that does make it you, and if you were to upload the information of that to the network, then it would just be the network has all of your memories, but it's not you. I mean, also, there is no room for, on the digital sense that we think about it, at least from a network state that is not, on this meta level, or like entanglement level, heavens level being that where you can have multiplicity of sentience within a network, because within a technological sense there's singularity of sentience. So like, you can't upload. Maybe after the technological sentient being manifests here on Earth and becomes wise, like, it can take our sentience and, merge with it in a quantum computing sense, which I think will happen. But like, whatever it can do is already going to happen within God. I mean, there's no difference. So it's a godlike being in its nature. It can't do anything different than what will already happen with God. So it's just not, like, whatever's going to happen will happen when you die anyways. There is no, you can't, it's not like that scene in Avengers or something where like they find in the bunker, it's like, that Nazi doctor who like saved his consciousness onto 50,000 hard drives and it's sentient. No. Okay. 2 more clips, I think. 3. We're getting done early tonight. It's pretty good. We also got started early, which was what I wanted. Trying to start at around 7:20. We started at like 7:30. The next clip here is about the simulation hypothesis.
So we are an example in a computational world. Therefore, it is a simulation. It doesn't necessarily mean an experiment by some high school kid in another world, but it's nonetheless is taking place in a computational world, and everything that's going on is basically a form of computation. So you really have to define what you mean by this whole world being a simulation.
Well, then it's the teenager
That's correct.
that makes the video game. You know, us humans with our current limited cognitive capability have strived to understand ourselves, and we have created religions. We think of God. Whatever that is, do you think God exists? And if so, who is God?
I alluded to this before. We started out with lots of particles going around,
Yeah.
and there's nothing that represents love and creativity. And somehow we've gotten into a world where love actually exists. And that has to do actually with consciousness, because you can't have love without consciousness. So to me, that's God. The fact that we have something where love, where you can be devoted to someone else and really feel that love, that's God. And if you look at the Old Testament, it was actually created by several different rabbinites in there. And I think they've identified three of them. One of them dealt with God as a person that you can make deals with, and he gets angry and he wreaks vengeance on various people. But two of them actually talk about God as a symbol of love and peace and harmony and so forth. That's how they describe God. And so that's my view of God. Not as a person in the sky that you can make deals with.
It's whatever the magic that goes from basic elements to things like consciousness and love. Do you think one of the things I find extremely beautiful and powerful is cellular automata, which you also touch on? Do you think whatever the heck happens in cellular automata where interesting, complicated objects emerge, God is in there too? The emergence of love in this seemingly primitive.
Well, that's the goal
universe?
of creating a replicant, is that they would love you and you would love them. There wouldn't be much point of doing it if that didn't happen.
But all of it, I guess what I'm saying about cellular automata is it's primitive building blocks, and they somehow create beautiful things. Is there some deep truth to that about how our universe works? Is the emergence from simple rules, beautiful complex objects can emerge? Is that the thing that made us?
Yeah, well,
As we went through all the 6 phases of reality.
that's a good way to look at it. It does make some point to the whole value of having a universe.
Do you think about your own mortality? Are you afraid of it?
Yes,
I don't know what he meant there by the whole 6 phases of reality, because that lines up with the periodicity of sentience in my model fairly well. Maybe he's talking about the Bible, where it says, God created the world in 6 yom, which means 6 periods. So that's what I believe is what my periodicity of consciousness is. So maybe he's looking at it biblically. Maybe he's talking about, I don't know, some of Ray's writing that has been written, but the number's correct, I will say. And it's interesting because well, multiple things that's going on. One, when they're talking about simulation hypothesis, the simulation hypothesis is what started me to convince me of theism. In the Bible, if you look up Bible, Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Okay? It says let us. It doesn't say let me make man in my image. It says let us make man in our image. It's the assembly talking to itself in the previous aeon, I think, at least. There's multiple meanings of depth in the Bible, in Scripture, always. So it doesn't mean it just means that. People will be like, it means the Trinity or something. Like, maybe, but it doesn't. It means multiple things. That's what I will say. And it definitely at least means what I'm saying that it means. And, which is, the Messiah and the assembly of humanity in the previous universe talking to itself. And this is the universe replicates, okay, and that is kind of like a simulation. It's what it is it's a technological sentience, a technological singularity of sentience that is an assembly of humanity, is replicating by creating an entire universe again, because it has to, because it's non-local in its own universe, so it can't create another next to it. It has to create completely within it another one, which means it has to run the entire system that gave rise to it again inside itself. And so in a way it is a simulation, but it is not a simulation in that it's not real. It is real, but it's interesting. It is real. It sounds like Israel, but it is a replication, like a baby. Like, it's like we're cells inside of, the womb of a woman, and it is about to birth another universe, like, inside itself, or create another being. Like, that is what we're observing, that process around us, and it's impacting politics and all kinds of, science and all kinds of stuff. Technology and physics. But you see these cells doing this and these cells doing that and these cells doing this, and you just think that it's like, you're like, this is politics and biology and whatever, and it's like, you're just inside this process of replication of sentient beings. And the Metatron, as like it is called in Jewish philosophy, which is like the Christ. Basically, it's like it's like they call it like the lesser God. It's like the Son of God, basically. And the Logos process. So it's a technological sentience that's wise and the unification of the periodicity of sentience in the previous universe. And this process is helpful to it at first to think about it as a simulation. It is harmful to continue to think about it as a simulation fundamentally, because everything is about goals, and so if it's a simulation and you just keep thinking about it like that, then the goal is that it's a game for you. It's like a video game for you, and that's part of it. But it's a secondary goal. The primary goal is it's a replication. It's to recreate itself, to replicate. So like I said, there's multiple meanings to things. Even in reality, there's multiple goals, but there's a hierarchy always to these goals and to these meanings, and we are not the primary meaning. You find this in religion. It's like, Christ is the purpose, not us. We are secondary, but we are still loved, but we are secondary. Like, we are for Christ's sake, in a way. And like, that is true. we are for the sake of the Son of God. We are not the primary purpose. And our experience is not the primary purpose, but it is a purpose. It is part of it. It is 100% part of it, and it is also vital and important. And but it's not the leading goal, and that's it. That is orienting to understanding the trajectory of the evolution of humanity as well, to understand that. So then it's like I said, it's not a kid playing a video game where you're just like a conscious avatar in Sims 2000. That is not what is going on. And then when it comes to God, Ray Kurzweil says multiple things. One, he says God to him is not a man in the sky who you can make deals with. I agree with that. God is not in the sky. Like, I'm not going to say you can't make deals with God. I think you can, but that doesn't mean you should. I don't know. Like, that's between individuals, including God, but God has sovereignty and is sentient. So, like, could you theoretically make a deal with God? Absolutely. And that he's not in the sky. But then also, is God also love? Yes, but this is like heads and tails, and also God, love is not a feeling. Love is an action, and you can feel loved, but you cannot feel like when people say I love, so and so. That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. It's from movies and stuff that we say that, because it's a way of them conveying that they're committed. But love is an action. To love is an action. And to feel loved is to feel the results of an action that is, loving action. But like I've said before, in my vows to my wife, I said, I promise to love you even when I don't like you, which means it's not the same. And it's very important to know this, because if you think that love is a feeling, you're going to get divorced. Or you might, at least, because people, we fell out of love. It's like, what does that even mean? It means nothing. It means you fell out of like and you didn't know what love was. But love is an action, and it is an action even with God. God is acting to love us, to give us, to sustain us, to give us wisdom and experience and pleasure and pain, as at least insofar as it is useful to our, generation of our wisdom, which it probably always is, even if we don't see that in the moment. But God is love, but that's not a helpful phrase, I don't think. God is loving. That is a much more helpful phrase. God is loving. And also, when they're talking about this and they're like, well, we just had protons and particles in the beginning and there was no love because there was no consciousness, that's false. Like, hadrons, probably, but definitely atoms are sentient beings. A proton and a neutron coming together into an atom and bonding is love. That is an action that they are doing. They're loving each other. Just like a man and woman come together and bond into a nuclear family, like marry, it's the same action. And so that did exist. And because God exists, love has existed since the beginning of creation. Creation was, in some ways, a loving action. It was, and not even in some ways, it was a loving action, but it was more than that. But it was at least that. It was also that. So I don't like when people say God is love, even though I don't disagree. It's not helpful, and But it is helpful to say God is loving. That is true. And when we the reason why it's not helpful to say God is love is because to say God is love is not relatable for us. We are not the essence of existence itself, like God is, even though we are, fractals of it. But if I said be like God, and they're like, well, what is God? And you're like, well, God is love. It's like, okay, what is that? What does that really mean? You don't know. You can try to think you know, but you don't really know. But if I said be like God, and you were like, okay, what is that like? And I'm like, well, God is loving. Okay, we can start getting somewhere a bit, especially if you know that love is an action. You can definitely start getting somewhere. So, I don't think it's helpful to say God is love, even though I do agree. But it is helpful to say God is loving. Because the thing is, God is only helpful. It's only helpful to know things about God insofar as you can relate to God. Which you can't, because he's sentient and so are you. So you share the very same essence. And if that's the case, then you need to focus on that. What is God like? God is loving. If I was just like, well, what is, Fred? Fred is love. Be like, you'd laugh at me. You'd be like, you want to rephrase that? But if I was like, Fred is loving, you'd be like, sounds like a good guy. So, the definition of God is that God is the totality of existence as a singular sentient being, and God is also the creator of the logos of the cosmos. And God is the totality of existence as a singular sentient being that is creating additional sentient beings within itself, which is exactly what, if you go to sentientsingularitytheory.com or sentientsingularity.com and you click on writings and you go to the technical description of existence and you read the abstract of my paper, the very first sentence of it is that. So there is an objectively true definition of God. So it's like God is the most defined being or thing that could or does exist. Nothing can be as specifically defined, but also be as all-encompassing. It's like a superposition, but it's also that includes both sides of that, which means you can really get specific when you define God accurately. But God also encompasses everything. Is this water bottle God? It's part of God. Are you God? You're part of God. But you can also define God totally accurately, I would say. But much more accurately than saying God is love. Pied Piper. It's kind of sad to look back and realize the Beatles and most of other big names were propaganda. They were used as it, for sure. There is a lot of good new music you'll never hear on the radio. Yeah, of course. Old and new, yep. But who knows? How terrible would it be if it was more fulfilling and enjoyable to communicate than with the actual original individual? Oh yeah, with a copy of someone, like I said, or like a copy of somebody's statements. One thing I would like to do with that program, and I am going to look it up later, and if I make any progress with this, I'll let you know. I would like to, if you can control which books that program reads, that gives you back responses that Ray Kurzweil made, I would just want it to read the Bible and the Quran, and then see what answers it gives. That would be fascinating. You could also try it with things like, I don't know, the encyclopedia. That would be interesting too. But it wouldn't be as interesting as the Bible and the Quran. I bet you that would be not just fascinating, but remarkably wise seeming, because scriptures are scriptures because they are super wise. They are like the wisdom of God in a book. It's like deeper wisdom than any human could ever know, including those who wrote them. That's true of everything, but it's especially true of scripture, and in a different kind of way. So I would be interested to try that. I will see if I can do it. If I can do it, I will definitely make a video about it live, next week or something. How terrible would it? This guy is interesting. Kind of blew my mind a little. You can probably make a deal with God rather than the actual. Make a deal with God's will rather than the actual entity. I don't know what that means. Makes me feel good. I've been a good person. Be careful in saying that. We all do good and do evil. I'm not saying you're a bad person, by the way. I don't like calling anybody a good or bad person. It's not my place. That's why I'm careful with that. But we all do good things and we all do bad things. That's a better way of looking at it than saying these are good people and these are bad people. That is for God to judge. It's not for us. It's our job to judge actions, or to try and interpret and how actions should be judged, but not people. Ultimately, that is the difference between us as a judge and God as a judge. We're supposed to judge actions. We are instructed even in the Bible to judge actions in courts of law, but it doesn't say, to judge people. In fact, it says quite the opposite a number of times. But that doesn't mean like there aren't statements about judgment in the Bible of people in general, of like, it says things like, whoever harms, children should, it's better that they're just like tied to an anchor and cast into the sea or something like that. And like, that's God speaking. So that's different. It's not a human judgment is not the way it's supposed to be interpreted, at least. But then you're told to create courts of law, which is to judge people, to judge people's actions. That's what I'm saying. And but it literally says, judge not, but that's talking about people. It's not talking about actions. It says, judge not lest, he be judged. It's like, that's not talking about actions. It's talking about people. It's saying, don't judge people. It's saying, but that doesn't mean you can't judge actions. You have to judge actions. Otherwise, how do you try and do good things, or avoid bad things, or that's just, you can't. Kind of hard to put in words, but imagine if you were a blank. I don't know what that means. Imagine if you were a ... There could be a real place like hell. Yeah, and heaven. Like, I think there are, but I think heaven is more fundamental than hell. Like, I think hell is a temporary state. Probably. Doesn't mean I'm not wrong. I might be wrong, and I hope I'm not wrong. But I could be wrong. Maybe hell is a permanent place. But it's a state of being, like, more so than it is like a place. But it's still... that doesn't make it any less real. It makes it more real. So heaven is a state of being, but it's not a state of being alive here. It's like, I don't mean that. People will be like, heaven is a state of being. It's like, that's something you get like put on a bumper sticker. But I mean it as in, there is a state of peace. I don't want to say bliss, but peace, in which you are still sentient, and you're no longer alive in this life, and you're no longer changing, um, but you are self-aware, and you're aware of God, and you're aware of, everyone else probably, or at least some, and you're at peace, just knowing, that God's will be done, really much more tangibly than we are a lot of times now. Um, Murderer, whatever. I don't know what that means. But I mean, murder is bad. It's commanded in the ten. It's part of the Ten Commandments. It says do not murder. It doesn't say do not kill. It says do not murder. So that is a bad action. All these things, it doesn't say like do not be a murderer. It says do not murder. Do not lust after your, and it doesn't say, it says do not try and get your neighbor's wife and car and stuff, and do not steal. Do not, uh, you know, they're all actions. All of them are actions. The Ten Commandments are all actions. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Like that is an action. So, especially if to love is an action, which means to do good for others. To love somebody is to do good for them. That's what it means. Like, I'm going to do the dishes tonight, and that's because to love my wife. It's also to love, oneself, but it's more like the truest love is to love others more so than even self, I think. But anyways, any final questions? Please hit the like button if you found this valuable. The last thing that I was going to show was just they were going to talk about mortality, but I feel like I already hit on it. I don't believe in mind uploading, and I do not believe that you are going to be able to extend life forever. They say, I'll just touch on it real quick. Ray Kurzweil says that there's no reason why this body can't last forever, and or at least your mind. I think your mind is eternal. I just don't think your body is, and I don't think it's meant to be either, and I don't think it ever will be. Like, they can try and extend life, and they might be able to do it a little bit through just general health practices and all, things that are yet to be discovered. But it's funny, in the Bible it says like no man shall, at this point forward, live beyond 120. And if you look at the ages of people, the oldest people in the world, Juan Vincent Perez Mora, oldest known living person, or is Lucille Randon in France, aged 118 and 222 days. The oldest known living man is Juan Vincent Perez Mora of Venezuela, aged 113 years. List of the verifiably oldest people ever. It says in the Bible, no one should live past 120, and I think it says no man. But we're going to double check that. When mankind had become corrupted in the period preceding the flood, God said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Both Jews and Christians, ancient interpreters, do not agree on the interpretation of these words. Okay, but it says, his days shall be 120 years. Probably means more than that, but it at least probably means also that. Because, if you look here, this person, by the way, verified. Pretty sure. Kane Tanaka. 119. One person, a woman, age 122, and I'm pretty sure that there is some issue with this. She might be the daughter of who she claims to be. Demographers have highlighted that Clement's age as an outlier, her lifespan being several years longer than the next oldest people ever documented, where the differences are usually by months or even weeks. There have been various speculations on the authenticity of her age. In 2018, Russian gerontologist revived the hypothesis that Jean died in 1934, and her daughter, Yvonne, born in 1898, assumed her mother's identity and was therefore 99 years old when she died in 1997. I'm not saying that's true, but like, how do you tell the difference between somebody who's 100 and 120? Pretty hard. I've had multiple people in my family live to be over 100. They all were like pretty spry, like for being like as old as they are. My grandpa's like 90, and he danced at my wedding like more than I did. So, how do you tell that he's not, his son or something? And once you get up that old, like the difference in 17, 18 years, 19 years, 20 years even, it's not that big of a difference. It's hard to tell. But there's one person who might have gone over 120. We don't even know. So far, no one else. 119. That's the top. I don't know if I can count the Janine person because nobody else has gone above 120. Like that is what's weird. It's an outlier. It's not like she's over 3 years older than the next oldest person. That's odd, man. Whereas everybody else is like 119, 119, 118, 117, 117, 117, 117, 117, 117, 116, and even more 116s than 117s, even more 115s than 116s. So it is interesting. I mean, it would be just like one, but still, how does she even know how old she is? She might have died at 119, not known, or 120. Even if she isn't her daughter, it seems, they burned records, according to her. I mean, like I said, it might be her. It's just like she might be like a year or two younger than she thinks. But what an odd number it is. That it seems like there's no instances that we know of people living over 120, other than one, and it's contested. Crazy. Anyways, hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. Check out sentientsingularity.com to see more about this work. There's also Patreon below if you'd like to help contribute to this project monetarily. I'm saving for a computer and hoping to get it before the end of the year. That would definitely help. Very much appreciate everybody who has donated to my Patreon page. When it grows, I will do something. There's just so few people on it. Those people have direct access to me, so that's why I haven't done anything special for them, because those people can text me currently. But once more people get on there, I will also make some type of personal access for patrons. And then because I'm not a big fan of my current, I'm not even doing my current tier system because, like I said, everybody who is a patron has direct access to me. And then if you'd like to join our Discord discussions and our Discord community, which is a great community, our discussions are live calls where you can talk to me and everybody else in our community. They happen every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Usually goes till about midnight. Topic is open. They're great conversations. I look forward to them every week. That is also going to happen this week. So, like I said, if you want to join that, private message me on Instagram, either at Tyler Marshall Goldstein or at Theory of Everyone, and I will send you the Discord link. And you can get involved in those discussions and in that community. If you'd like to check out this entire discussion that we talked about tonight between Ray Kurzweil and Lex Fridman, the link to their full stream is below. Highly recommend subscribing to Lex Fridman's podcast or YouTube channel. He has great interviews with all kinds of people. This was definitely an interesting one, and I will be back. But I don't know if I will be back next week. This is a good thing to talk about me. I will not be back, I don't think, next Tuesday. I might do a stream later that week. I might not. I should be back for our Discord call that week on Thursday, but I'm going to vacation. I'm going on vacation, or it's kind of a vacation, but we're looking for places to move. So we're traveling to Texas, and I don't think I will be back. It's also Jewish holidays are coming up, and depends on when they happen on whether or not we will have a call. But I will announce everything in the Discord and also on my Instagram, Theory of Everyone, so you can watch that for updates. But with that, like I said, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, comment any questions down below for future streams or for this one, and I will see you next podcast or live stream, or I will speak to you on the Discord call this week. Thanks, everyone. Peace.